Okay, guys. Well, would love to welcome everyone who is joining us today to the New Year, New You. We were really excited to do this because, and we're not really a resolution brand, but we believe that the beginning of any new year is a great time to be prepared, kind of have these conversations at the beginning of the year. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited to do this is we have a dear friend, someone I've known for a very long time joining us, Chloe Malas. We're so excited to have you on. And of course, we have Judy's preparedness queen, Soraya Sutherland. Really happy to talk to you and also just have kind of a greater conversation around why people don't prepare, some of the obstacles to preparedness. I think one of the challenges that we face as a brand, and we talk about this all the time, is there's two reasons why people don't prepare for emergencies. And the first reason is that people don't think that emergencies are going to happen to them. And the second reason is people think that if an emergency is going to happen, there's nothing they can do to prepare for it. So those are the two obstacles we face, which is why I'm so happy, Chloe, to have you on today, because we can hear your story. As background, Chloe and I have been friends for a really long time. Chloe's a star entertainment reporter at CNN, and we have worked together. We also have a friendship outside of school. And tragically, a year ago, Chloe had a house fire. She has two beautiful babies and a very handsome husband. And the story, when I heard it, was really daunting. And it's something I actually relayed to Soraya at the time that I heard it, because she had told me so many similar stories of people that were just so underprepared for these emergency situations. So I would love, Chloe, to pass the buck over to you and hear your story firsthand.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, I have known Simon for a very, very long time. I think it's been like 10 years or something. I
Ah,
I feel like such an old lady. And Soraya, it's so nice to meet you. You're so beautiful and so smart. And I'm so happy to meet you today. And I never thought that I would be talking about this ever. I never thought that this would be part of my life, my story. But I hope I can teach you guys a couple things that I learned. So a year ago this month, I live in New York in the suburbs of New York, right outside of New York City, in Westchester. And most of the houses out here are really, really old. I mean, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, in Atlanta, Georgia, where I was used to like new build homes. We live in a house that's 100 years old. Um, we had renovated quite extensively the house before we moved in. We've only been in the house for a couple years, but poured our savings into it. Had our two, beautiful baby boys in this house, Leo and Luke. Leo's 3.5 and Luke is 18 months. And we felt really settled. Leo had just turned 3. Actually, no, sorry, it was 2.5. And Luke was only 6 months old. And so it was like any other night. We had just gotten a new fireplace. So we have two fireplaces in the house, both wood burning, and one of them we had never touched before. It just looked pretty, but we didn't know if it really worked. We didn't know anything. So we paid couple grand to have somebody come out and put like a new flue and clean it out and make it, I don't know, do whatever you do, right? Like I don't know, but you pay somebody to come in who's referred and highly recommended to come and like make sure everything's okay. So pay and that's it, and you put the logs in. And we love wood burning fireplaces. My husband grew up in Westchester, having a roaring fire. You get a firewood delivery out here. I mean, like it's a thing to have like a roaring fire every night for a couple hours. Like it's fun. It's nice. You gather around the fireplace. So we had used it for just 2 times. We usually use the one in the living room. My husband had started a new business, and that was like now his home office. He used to be the president of a restaurant group. So we were like really breaking that room in And this night we had put both our kids to bed, which is a huge feat to have both your kids in bed. I was ready for my wine, ready to watch like something on Netflix with my husband, who was, of course, falling asleep and like barely paying attention to what I was saying, which is like my biggest pet peeve. So I was annoyed. Um, and I wasn't in my pajamas yet. I'd love to get in my pajamas and have a shower and stuff like that, but I wasn't. And I'm kind of glad I wasn't, obviously. So we're sitting in front of the fireplace. I'm having, I think, maybe a glass of wine, or I hadn't poured it yet, sitting there just trying to keep my husband awake. And I look over to my left, and I had this huge lamp that I had bought, and it's from Restoration Hardware. It was this huge lamp with a huge shade around it. And I saw just the teeniest bit of sticky smoke. And the house, all the lights were pretty off or dim. And I just remember in that moment being so annoyed, because I was like, of course, like this house is old. There's something like wrong with the fireplace. Like, why is there smoke? So I was like, Brian, wake up. Like there's smoke. So he's like, what do you want me to do about it? So we start opening the windows, which you shouldn't do because like oxygen for a fire, but I had no idea. No smoke detectors are going off. I'm not worried. It's just a little bit of smoke. But something tells me like, just go upstairs and check on the kids. So I go upstairs, but I don't open their doors because like, I don't want to deal with them waking up. This is what's going on through my head. And I just listen. I hear nothing. And it smells a little funny, but nothing crazy. Maybe like burning plastic, like slightly, but like nothing crazy. And I'm like a helicopter mom, you know? So I come back downstairs, but something still doesn't feel right. So I'm like, Brian, like, I don't know, the smoke's not going away. I think it's getting worse. And he opens the front door. I'm like, that's not going to do anything. You know, like this is all happening within real time. Long and short, I don't want to take up too much time, but Brian, I'm like, go upstairs and you check on the kids. I'm like, go in the baby's room. Well, he goes to the top of the stairs, but he doesn't go in the baby's room. He goes in Leo's room, our toddler's room. Thank God he went into Leo's room. And if he hadn't, I don't know if I would be here maybe today. He goes into Leo's room and he screams my name out. And Leo's room is filled with smoke. And I run upstairs, but still at that moment, I'm like, I don't understand, why is the room filled with smoke? And I'm still not thinking fire. There's no flames, you know, there's just smoke, but it was like black smoke. So we open up the windows and we take Leo downstairs, and I don't call 911. I call Brian's brother, who's a home inspector. And I say, like, what do you think is going on? Should we put the fireplace out, like pour some water on it? Like, I don't know what to do. He's like, you might have a fire behind your walls. I'm like, there's no way. Crazy. Like, no, I don't. He's like, no, you really should call the fire department. So like Simon said, I called the fire department and I said, hey, can you guys come? Like, there's some smoke. And I was explaining, and I said, but I don't, fire, smoke detectors didn't go off. There's no flames. Can you like turn your sirens off?
This is the part that kills me, because I feel like you don't want to be the person that overreacts.
Because we're like not sure. And so Brian's like, yeah, tell them to turn the sirens off, which sounds really so silly. And they're like, sorry, ma'am, like we can't do that. And we're going to send like everybody. So I'm like, the F word comes through my head. I'm like, oh my God, my neighbors are going to kill me. And so it's like, I just figured they're going to come and find nothing. So I take Leo down to the newly renovated basement that I had just paid my last like dollar in savings for, this like old stupid basement. Okay. I'm sitting down there in the playroom. We're watching Disney Channel. I'm giving him another bottle and like like some candy. He's like, why am I awake? I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's just fun. The fire department's here. Like, so fun. So the fire department's walking around. I can hear them, and I'm a neat freak. And I just hear them clobbering around in the house. And I'm like, my floors, they're so clean. They're getting dirty. You know, like, again, like I have no idea what the hell, that my whole life's about to change. And so next thing you know, Brian brings the baby downstairs, and I'm like, why did you wake the baby up? He's like, they have to go in Luke's room. So they're going around with heat seeking guns, looking for heat behind the walls, but they're not finding anything. So next thing you know, they're probably at the house for 10 minutes or so, maybe 15 minutes. And a firefighter screams out, and there's maybe like 6 firefighters in the house. We found it, screams it. Next thing you know, 2 firefighters come downstairs, or 3, and they're like, "Man, you need to leave. There's a fire in your house. You need to get out now." And I said, what are you talking about? And they're like, "You need to get out." I gave the baby to a fireman. I have no shoes on. I have no jacket on. Luke's in his little sleep sack. Leo's in his pajamas. I'm holding Leo. My heart's pounding. I go to the front door, and then I start to kind of cry. And I'm like, I don't have my shoes. Like, I don't know where my animals are. I have 2 cats. I have a dog. They're like, "You need to get out." Like, no time for that. I don't know my neighbors super well. I do now, and I love them. But I work in the city, like we were city kids, like lived in the city, Manhattan, for over a decade. Like, we had been in the house for, 2 years, but I don't know. It's just not the way I remember growing up, where everybody's having barbecues and hanging out together. I didn't really know my neighbors.
And you never had a fireplace, Chloe, before this, right? Like, you didn't know anything about
No,
fireplaces.
growing
Right.
up, we never, my dad's on this right now. Hi, Dad. But no, we never, like, we had an electric one or like gas one, but like we never used it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe once a year, Dad turned
Right.
it on, but like never. So then anyway, I'm banging on my neighbor Annie's door, and she lets us in. They shut the street down, and I'm still thinking that, like, I'm going to sleep there tonight. It's going to be okay. And then Brian comes across the street, and he's crying hysterically. The house is gone. The house is gone. I'm like, what are you talking about? The house is gone. He's like, it's gone. I'm like, he's overreacting. He's like, it's gone. And then Brian's parents show up. My brother-in-law comes down from where he is. My nanny comes over. I'm on the phone with some of my CNN colleagues, like Lisa France, who's on this call. And now I'm hysterical. I'm calling everyone, being like, my house is on fire, because I don't know what to do. I'm calling my mom in Atlanta, my dad in Texas. And then I tell my in-laws to take the kids and to their house. They live nearby. And then a few hours later, they let me back into the house. They saved the house. So they saved the structure of the home. They literally went into the house with axes and literally started ripping apart the fireplace, the walls of my children's rooms, because the fire broke out behind the fireplace and was burning and had lit up the wall behind that fireplace, met up to our kitchen wall, and the children's bedrooms were above it, and their walls were burning. Why did the smoke detectors not go off? Well, I unplugged the alarm system 2 days before, because all of my windows have little chirp, like little beeps on it for my alarm system. And a few of them were low battery. And my alarm company was coming out that Monday to put new batteries in, but they kept chirping and they kept me up at night. So I unplugged it. And I swear I told them, like, I'm unplugging this. I had no idea that my smoke detectors were hardwired into my house. I never crossed my mind. So they didn't go off. Anyway, I came into the house. The entryway looked normal, but then everything else was destroyed. Different little parts of the house looked like, oh, okay, like, this is going to be okay. And it's not. Like, basement's flooded. I didn't know anything about smoke damage. But by the next day, we couldn't walk into our house unless we had like a crazy gas mask on. The house, the smoke permeated the whole house. My clothes, all my children's baby clothes are gone. All the keepsakes I had, their blankets from the hospital, gone. So like, maybe a picture frame was like still there, but then like every bit of furniture was destroyed in my house, even if like fire didn't touch it. The ceiling of my kitchen was collapsed because they pumped hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. I have the number actually into the home. But they got to do that to save it from burning completely down and then burning the houses next door to you. So, part of you is kind of like, why the hell did you do this to my house? And like, what happened? But it's like, no, ma'am, like we had to destroy everything. So I was luckier than most. I got to go upstairs into my closet, get the passports, birth certificates, which, by the way, I had no idea where anything was, grabbed my jewelry, and like surreally grabbed a couple. I like went in the kids' rooms that were just destroyed, and I opened up this dresser that was like broken in half, and I like took a couple things, and the firemen are like, you can't. I'm like, I'm grabbing this blanket, okay? Like, and I grabbed a couple of my clothes, and then I never went back. And we walked out of the house, and I literally threw my cat in the car. Hammy sat in the car for like 2 hours, like 3 hours. And then we went to Brian's parents' house. I lived there for like 2 weeks, and it was crazy. People from all over the country started like sending baby clothes and books and all this stuff. And I'm like, wait, like, you feel guilty accepting these things because, we have insurance. I have family. I have some money in savings. Like I learn how to accept it too, because people want to help. Like people want to reach out, and I was in a state of shock. I mean, like I was like, wait, like I don't have, I remember the next day being like, I don't have pajamas. I don't know what's our homeowner's insurance. Like, who do we call? Like, what kind of insurance do we have? Like
And
what
I'm
is
sure all that
going
information,
on?
Chloe, was kind of all over the place
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. So that's, and, something interesting. They call them like ambulance chasers. So many people showed up to our house that night at like 2 a.m. to, who listened to the, like police scanners. And they
You're
know,
joking me.
and they show up and they want to be your insurance adjuster and like third-party insurance adjuster and things like that. So it's really confusing and you don't know who to trust or who to talk to. And so we were lucky that Brian's parents were nearby. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have family nearby. I don't know where we would have gone, I guess, to like a hotel. And then, obviously then the whole world changed 2 months later with a pandemic. And then our house, finally began construction months later, but we had to go before the state of New York and prove to them that our house was essential, or else we'd
To
be
have the
homeless.
construction, to greenlight the construction.
Yeah, because essential building was not essential in the state of New York at that time because of COVID, and you don't want a certain amount of people together and risk transmission. But we had to explain that like, we're going to run out of insurance money and it's a pandemic and we're not going to have anywhere to live. And we can't risk Brian's parents who are, over 60, us living with them, so like we have to start construction. Many calls, many tears. And finally, we got approval, but it wasn't easy. But yeah, I mean, look, I never thought anything like this would happen. It's crazy, but we're back in our house and, now, but I'll never forget standing there in the middle of my living room that night, or what was my living room. And, the fire chief, who's been the fire chief here in Pelham, where I live in Westchester for like 25 years, he was like, you can replace things, not people. And this would have been a very different weekend, a very different night for you if you had not gone into Leo's room. And like that, I made him actually repeat like 5 or 6 times that night, because I was like, well, what do you mean? So if I had just gone to bed and Brian slept in front of the fire, Leo would have died maybe 30 minutes later, they think, due to smoke inhalation. 45 minutes later, the baby, maybe I'd be dead. And I don't know, would Brian have eventually, like, I don't know. I have no idea. Our smoke detectors never would have gone off. So for a while, I'm a lot better now, but you go through these like scenarios and like, what if, like, it's super overwhelming, but again, it's not like my house like burned to a crisp, like on the movies where you're walking through rubble, ours is a different sort of situation because by the grace of God, we just caught it like while
Right.
it was happening, you
Right.
know? Um, or it would have been like that scene in This Is Us where they wake up and everything is on fire, you
Right.
know, and you do finally wake up. So
And
again, you kind
and
of wonder
Chloe,
about those guardian angels, like who's
right.
there making us go, like what made Brian go in Leo's room that night, you know? So
First of all, my phone is filled with people who are on the Zoom right now sending me text messages. They have goosebumps and some of them have tears. Like your story, it's so powerful because everything you're saying is, I think, things in the back of our mind we do all the time. We downplay emergencies. We go against our gut when we know something feels off. And it's so scary to go down that world of, the what ifs. What if I didn't go into Leo's room? But I
yeah,
can't, I said this to you before, but I can't thank you enough for sharing this story, because even just people who are talking, who are in the Zoom right now, this is like it's a great moment for people to reflect on what's going on in their life and the things that they can do. Because I'm sure, had you ever had a conversation with Brian about fire safety or talked about an evacuation plan, like were those things at all in your orbit?
nope, nope. No, I'm like, I order stuff on Amazon, you know, I'm sure I had like a million flashlights somewhere, but I don't know where they are and I don't know where the batteries are and I don't know why I had like my baby briefcase for each baby in their closet with their birth certificate and passport in there. And like, where's my passport exactly? And like, no, I don't have any plan. Like I didn't have a fire extinguisher. We didn't have backup battery smoke detectors. My shoes were in the mud room, you know, like where I like make everybody keep their shoes. Like I
Right.
didn't have an extra pair of shoes. Like I don't have now I have in my car, but I didn't have any like stuff. We were so cold across the street at our neighbor's house. Our kids had no jackets. The neighbor was so sweet. She gave us like some of her kids' clothes. But, like they wouldn't let us back in the house to get
Right.
anything. It was like what you have is what you have is what you have. You know? So like Amber's so lucky that like it's the middle of the night now where it's like almost midnight. We're so lucky like Brian's parents are there and they let us, you know, we went to their house and we slept there. It's like the most insane night of my life. And not to mention my son Leo, he's so smart to this day. Like he freaks out when he hears fire sirens. He freaks out whenever the smoke detectors go off when I'm cooking because I burn everything. You know, he still asks about like smoke in his room, you know, like that's a whole thing right
And
there.
it's as you were talking, I just kept thinking, oh, this is something I heard from Soraya as we were building Judy. Soraya would give us these tidbits like you always need to have a pair of shoes underneath your bed, because most people who are in emergencies, when they quickly evacuate their home in the middle of the night, they never have shoes on. And it never struck to me like, oh, I guess that's something I should do, but how important is that?
Yeah,
But
so important.
yeah, and there's so many other things. Soraya, I would love to pass the buck to you and talk about some of the things that kind of your takeaways from that story. And I know you have so many similar stories from the 13 years you've been doing this.
Yeah, no, Chloe, thank you for sharing that. It's so important for people to hear what you said. I never thought this would happen to me. I mean, that's powerful. That's the one thing we hear with so much frequency in any type of emergency. That's the first thing we hear. I never thought this would happen to me. And that's powerful because it's happening to people like you and me. It's happening to people who don't anticipate it. And to your point about the smoke detectors, always check batteries. It's so critical. Every 6 months is a great opportunity to just check them, make sure they're working, change the batteries, make sure you have that backup, because you don't always realize what's hardwired, what's not hardwired. And on average, statistically, there is a house fire every 24 seconds. I mean, that is powerful. It's happening everywhere. So just general awareness of where's your stuff, right? If you have no time, what are you going to do? You're going to grab your people and you're going to get out, right? People and pets. If you have 5 minutes, what can you realistically grab? And even just making checklists and saying, in this moment, it's hard to rationalize. Something you said really, really stuck with me, that you couldn't put it together, right? You saw the smoke, but you couldn't quite, it didn't make sense. didn't make sense that that could be happening to you. And it's actually normal in disasters. We find the one thing a lot of us do is we try and rationalize the irrational. We try and bring in and put into context this adverse, this crazy event into our lives. And that's part of the human brain trying to cope with the scenario. It's called milling, right? You're trying to verify, you're trying to figure out, like, could this be happening? And 10% of people actually do something. The 90% of us do nothing. So that is just the way your brain is configured. And the way we combat that is by creating checklists, by doing things on the front end, by rehearsing and practicing and doing a drill, or even just having those conversations so that when you're in those critical situations, you've done this before, right? You've gone through the mental checklist. You know exactly, what you're going to do, what you're going to grab, where your stuff is. But shoes are the one thing we see all the time at shelters. People show up, they have no shoes. And you don't realize how important, that can be. And just not having something in your feet when you show up, it's critical. So, I mean, just such great, really powerful story, just so moving. I have children. Many people on this call have children. Just, as a parent, that's where your heart goes, right? To your family members and your children. So just being able to have those conversations. And, the other piece you mentioned that I thought was really important was sometimes it's just surviving the experience, right? And just getting out of it, right? You're physically okay, but it's the emotional trauma of living through it and then the aftermath of living through that experience. And so things that you can do and things that we can do with our children and our families is allow for them those outlets. So ask those questions, right? So how does that make you, what do you feel about this? What questions do you have? So when they ask about something specific to smoke in the room, well, what did you think? What were their questions? And kind of prompt them with that and include them in part of that process. And it can help with their recovery, right? So, okay, we had this situation happen. So let's create a go bag. What are we going to put in our bag if we need to? And have your child be part of that process. Because when we include them, we give them the tools, we give them the ability to face that situation without fear. Right now, you're giving them a positive action to counteract that negative experience, and it gives them the tools then to just overall be better off in facing those experiences just in their life in general. And it empowers them to feel that they're part of that solution. So that's just, it's something that we're all going to deal with, and it's not just children, it's adults, it's everyone, especially going through anything with that kind of trauma. But as they get older, having those, conversations and including them in that solution-oriented process, right? So this is a big, scary thing, right? House fires, earthquakes, but how can we mitigate that, right? So what do you think we should do? How can we help? How can we set up a go bag? How can we have things ready to go? What do you think we should do? And then let them work through that process with you. It'll enable them to, be part of the solution, which I think is also important. The other piece that you talked about were your documents, right? You didn't know who to call. You didn't know where to begin. You didn't know where to start. And it's so common. And we don't often think that just doing a quick inventory of your house. So a really great thing I tell people to do is get their phone and put it on video and walk through your house to document, right? Everything that's in your room. So when you go, go ahead.
No, you're right. Keep going. Yep.
So when you go to file an insurance claim, you have some documentation of what your house looked pre-disaster. It's going to help you. I'm sure you can probably talk to how that worked with your insurance.
Okay. Yes. Every single person that's listening, I know you all think this is crazy, but and my dad, okay, this is not, you have to do this tonight, tomorrow. Film your house. Film it. Walk around your house and film it, because I will tell you a few things. So if your house burns to the ground, you don't have anything. So you're not going to know where anything was. You think you do, but you're not. With us, a lot of our house, I was like, I don't understand. My dining room table looks okay, but it's no, it's not. Your table's wood and the whole house stinks, and it's been sitting here for weeks. The whole house, They gutted it within like a couple days. We had fans and humidifiers in the house for like 2 weeks or something. Then they took pretty immediately, a company came and they took every single thing out of our house and they wrapped it and they wrote it down. Okay. So they're like kitchen, like everything, even like the dirty stuff in the sink they took, which is like so gross. Okay. But they take everything in the house. Then it's in a warehouse. I didn't see my stuff for like almost a year. And they give you packets and packets of paper, and it's like fake orange, and they say it's worth $2, you know, but like really I bought it for 20 in Italy. I didn't. This is like 50 cents off Amazon, but you know what I'm saying? And they price it out, right? And so they write everything down, but it's also like every pencil, every single thing in your house, you're like, I don't even know what this stuff is. And I don't even believe that like I even own that. Like, what are you talking about? And they do all that. You have no way to like verify it. You have no idea what it is. And they have all this stuff. And then when you go for your bid to like fight for money, you know, there's a depreciation. So your couch might have cost $5,000 when you bought it, but you've had it for 2 years and now it's worth pretty much nothing. So insurance is only going to give you like a fraction of what that couch costs, you know? So we were lucky that insurance gave us a check for, you know, a good amount of money, but nothing crazy. And we went out and bought some furniture for a rental house, you know, and we had to fight them on a rental house, you know, because they wanted to give us a house that was just not a very good living environment for my kids. And then, you know, we fought them to get an amazing house, and they went for it, but we lived with no furniture for a year, except for like very basic stuff. And it does like change your relationship to things. So then a year later, I went to the warehouse and they took everything off the pallets, which was the weirdest thing. And I looked at all my stuff and like, I can't have it because like there's laws in the insurance. They've given you money for certain things that you've replaced, so you can't take it back. But also it's all damaged anyway. But I went through it to see if there were any keepsakes that like were in there, like a baby blanket that might reek of smoke, but that I want to maybe try to get preserved or things like that. Just making sure there wasn't anything that was going to get thrown out that 2 years from now, I'm like, oh my God, where is that? You know, like my grandma's Christmas ornaments, stuff like that. But again, like sorry, but yeah, it's crazy. You don't know what you have. You can't remember. If you close your eyes, you try to think right now, what's on your dresser? Like, I mean, I kind of know, but like, you don't know.
You don't know. You have
crazy. But that's what our insurance adjuster, Soraya, told us. You should film everything. So that's so interesting. I never heard that before. Also, something that people are doing now, they're getting these 360 cameras, like where you can like pay a service to come out and like kind of like video your whole house for you. But that's like next level. Just do it on your phone. But anyway.
No, that's a great point. You don't realize, especially when you're just in the aftermath of a trauma, trying to put yourself now back into like, okay, now I've got to work out through these decisions, and it's just difficult. So you can upload it to the cloud, put it on a flash drive. The other piece is keeping all of your important documents in a binder. And I always recommend having photocopies. So keep all the actual stuff. If you have a safe, that's one thing. But the reality is if you've got seconds to get out of your house, you're not fumbling with a key to get into a safe. So keep it as, you know, originals and safety deposit boxes. If you need to keep it in a safe in your home, make photocopies of this stuff, put it in a binder, stick it in a bag by your front door, or near an exit to your home with shoes, and have it ready to go. So you just grab it. You don't have to think about it. Always keeping shoes in your car, because if you have to run out of your house, at least, you know, if your car is not in the house proper, you've got it in your car, right? So many people run out of homes in fires and they forget their car keys, and then they can't go back inside and get car keys. So keeping an extra set of car keys or house keys in your actual emergency kit. there's copies of credit cards and IDs, the front and the back, because if you lose your credit cards, first of all, you can't always remember who you're supposed to call. Now you're in this like web of trying to look up and find the 800 number to get these things replaced, front and back. Cash, again, depending on the time of night, time of day, where do you need to go? Do you have cash available? Small bills, things of that nature. The other really good tip that actually my mom told me about during a fire here in California, packing our suitcases with photos, because you're not using your suitcase all the time. I mean, most people aren't, but if you have suitcases around the house.
I did that.
Awesome.
Well,
and then
not in advance, but I did that night when they let me go back upstairs. Obviously I was like sick to my stomach and like, can't believe that like this is happening. All I wanted to do was just watch Netflix and have a glass of wine. And now I'm upstairs at like 1 a.m. and I had all these suitcases in my closet and I opened them and I'm like, hell no. Like I love photos. And I literally like, so I get to my in-laws' house. I have no clothes. Okay. But my suitcases are filled with like my jewelry, some of my favorite purses, my children's like baptism candles, and every single photo that I can grab. Okay. Every single like photo that I can grab. So that's funny that you say that. Like, and also like, it's like so I had a minute, like I got to go back in later, but it's like the sick feeling. It's like, you just want to like take everything with you, but like you actually can't. And yes, we had our cars. We had nothing in them like that was helpful. I had no cash. I never have cash. I still am working on that. But it was the middle of the night and it was a Friday night and it was a holiday weekend. Think like, I don't know what's in January, President's Day, or I don't know. There was something on that Monday.
MLK, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe, but there was a holiday and I just remember it was like a long 3-day weekend. Maybe that's what it was, but there was a long 3-day weekend and we couldn't reach our insurance agent. We couldn't reach anybody. So like nothing was getting processed or done. And then they were like, maybe we can have someone from another jurisdiction come out and look, but like, there's no sense of urgency, like we finally got somebody to like cut us a check 4 or 5 days later to help with just like stuff. Cause like now at this point, we're like totally out of pocket, for like so much stuff, like I'm like going to Gap and spending like $500 on like clothes. Like, I don't even know what I need. Like, what do my kids need? Like no diapers, which sounds, yeah, okay. I can go to CVS and I can buy diapers. Like I get that, but like everything I had is like, I can't even go back and get it, so it's just crazy emotions. And my coworkers at CNN were so amazing and people mobilized and, like, that's the other thing. This really makes you want to like reach out to strangers when things happen. Like when you hear a story about something that happens, like be that person that calls or sends a text message or an email or reaches out. I had messages from friends from high school that I hadn't even heard from since high school. And it was the nicest thing, strangers showed up to Brian's parents' house. I don't even know how they found out where we live, like so nice. I had like full on cries with people I've like never met before. It's like so moving. And like, I really saw a wonderful side of human kindness, but like, I want to be that person next time that like shows up to somebody's house with a bag of clothes that I don't need, I guess I also never really realized how important it really is to like pay it forward and give back too, because a lot of everything always sounds so distant and like not out and so out of my immediate bubble, like I don't have friends that have had a fire, so like, or a natural disaster where they've lost something. So again, like I really never thought this would happen to me or anybody else. So
that's a great point, Chloe. And when you're talking about the acts of human kindness, those are also opportunities to, like Fred Rogers says, teach your children to look for the helpers, right? Point out those opportunities for our children to see people doing acts of kindness. They see that through those processes. And, even as your children start to get older, having those conversations, about awareness, right? So just being aware of their surroundings, teaching them what's safe and not safe, pointing out opportunities throughout the day. Because it starts for them, they'll register, okay, if I smell smoke, what should I do? Right. So if I'm home and maybe you're not home, maybe this nanny is home with your children, making sure that you give those individuals the empowerment to make decisions, helping your children guide, even the adults to finding solutions to those problems. I can't tell you how many times it's been children or that have told adults about situations. We saw this in Fukushima during the Japan earthquake with the tsunami coming in. It was the children that urged the teachers to evacuate. We saw this in Indonesia with the tsunami. It was a 5th grader that recognized something in the water on the beach that he learned in his textbook, earlier in school, and got everyone off of that beach because the water started to create boxes. So realizing that we need to allow and listen to our kids because they have a lot of insight. So, and it's having those conversations. What do we do? If there's a fire in the house, where should you go? How should you get out? What should you do? How do you crawl? And where do you go? The other piece that is so important is you need to teach children not to hide from firefighters. I can't tell you how many kids do this. They get scared, they come in they with all of their gear and they hide and they get scared. So teaching them to stay low to the ground, to call out if they can, to put a wet washcloth if they can't get out of the room, if they can get something over their mouth, staying low to the ground, right? So that's the smoke will rise, stay as low as you can. Teaching them to crawl if they can't see, feeling their way out. One thing I teach my kids is we count doors to exits and hallways at hotels. In the event there's a fire and they can't see, count doors, 1, 2, 3, whatever, to the nearest exit. Just little things like that. And it's not doing it in a way that creates a sense of, again, empowerment, non-scariness. Okay, make it fun, right? Let's find out how many doors are to the exit, not knowing that you're now teaching them a critical survival skill. So there's the conversations, like you were saying earlier, that you had not had with your husband, Brian. Those are the critical conversations to have in non-disaster times, right? Where are you going to go? What if you guys were separated? Your husband was at work and your nanny was home with the kids. You both were gone. Where do you go? If you can't get back to your home, you said they closed the street. Where's your meeting point? And where has that been pre-designated? If phone lines are down, if you can't talk to each other, what's the plan, right? So understand, just walking through that. Okay, where are we going to go? We're going to meet here first. Okay, you're going to grab the kids. Does your nanny know what to do? Does she know?
And you know what that makes me think of? God forbid, like 9/11. I cannot imagine, like everyone's trying to call out, everyone's trying to use their cell phones. People can't get in touch with people. Phone lines are busy, and having a meeting point, so that's, really important. I never had these conversations, and we got 2 of our pets out of the house, but we couldn't find Chip, our other cat. He ended up being in the house for like over 24 hours hiding because he was so scared, and luckily he was okay and we finally got him out of the house. But yeah, it's a lot, and you only have a few minutes and you can't grab anything, so I also can't imagine, like, again, like if the house is ablaze around you. I mean, I didn't even know until you even just said these things, even after what I've been through. It makes sense, but I didn't know about the washcloth over the face or getting down low to the ground, so.
There's so many things. I think it's just more than anything, having the conversations on the front end. What are the questions that you guys have, and identifying those questions ahead of time, saying, okay, if something happened, walking through these scenarios. You said you're doing that a lot. Walk through them. They're not comfortable. They're really uncomfortable, but walk through them. Even if it's just, okay, if something happened right now, what's my plan? Where do I go first? Just run through that mental checklist. Like, where do I go first? Do my kids know what to do? Especially as your children get older, if you've got kids or whatever it is, talk about, like, do they know? It's funny because we're so used to, like, okay, I go in the front door and out the front door, and that's how I have to go, right? And we do this with everything. We go in the front door to work, we go out the front door. We get in for school, it's the same thing. It's routine, it's habit. Sometimes in an emergency, you can't process that you have to go out another door. So talking about okay, I can use my back door. Here are the different ways to get out, not only of our rooms, but our homes. And talking, okay, if something is blocking this, how are we going to get out, guys? Okay, we're going to use this back door, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to go around and we're going to go to the front of the house. Or if we can't go out this way. So making a habit of just practicing some of this stuff beforehand and teaching your children that it's okay to not do it the same way every time, right? That there is another option. And if option one's not available, it's retraining on how to then find the secondary option. The other piece, and I forgot to mention in the documents, vaccine records. If you ever have to try and find a vaccine record, good luck. But if you have copies of that, include that in your emergency documents pile, because you'll need them, especially if you have pets and you show up to a shelter. Okay, are they going to take your animal if they know they haven't been vaccinated for rabies or whatever the slew of vaccinations that you might be? And again, you may not be able to get a hold of your vet or individuals for that to be able to get that information. You mentioned something else that I thought was so good that I wanted to pull out. Phone lines. You can't get through. There's just some general information. So you can't get through on a phone line and your phone might die. A really good tip is to record a voice recording on your answering machine and just say, I'm okay. This is Chloe's voicemail. I'm okay. This is where I am, in case your phone dies, especially if people are trying to get a hold of you and they can't get through and it just goes to voicemail. It allows for them to, at least you've got a pre-recorded message. We see this a lot during active shooter events. People do this because people are trying to call. A lot of people they can't handle the trauma of people calling, so they pre-record a message, but it also lets people know that you're okay. The other piece is being able to, if you need to preserve your battery, you can turn it off as well. But again, lines get inundated, especially with cell phones. Cell phones go down. Also, having an out-of-state contact is critical. So being able to say, you said your mom lives in Dallas, so maybe she's your out-of-state contact, and making sure everyone knows that that's your out-of-state contact, because the local phone lines are inundated, but you will be most likely be able to call out to an out-of-state contact and say, hey, listen, I'm okay. We just left. This is where I am. So then your husband, Brian, can't get a hold of you. He can call the out-of-state contact. And she said, I just talked to Chloe. This is what she said. This is where she is. So that's why they ask for that. I know it's that line on the bottom of every kid's emergency form, out-of-state emergency contact. And that's why we ask for this in the event that we can't get a hold of people within the immediate area. And we see this time and time again after disasters and emergencies and things of that nature. So that was a really good point. Because at least, during a house fire, infrastructure is intact, right? For the most part, it's not wide scale, community-wide disaster. So those are all things that we don't always think about, right? We don't always want to think about. It's hard for us to go to those places to think about those things. So those are just a few kind of key pieces. And then as your kids get older, teach them how to use fire extinguishers. Small fires and can be prevented from becoming big fires if you know how to use them, right? So keeping them in places like your kitchen, the most common place for house fires, right? Start in kitchens, because let's be honest, like you said, your smoke detectors go off often. I can manage to burn a pot of water. So, I mean, it's the reality. We all need those reminders. So fire extinguishers in kitchens, living rooms, like, the general living spaces. And then teaching your kids how to use them and making sure they're accessible, not buried behind 4 layers of kitchen supplies underneath the sink.
And teaching yourself how to use them, because Soraya had to teach me this summer how to use a fire extinguisher. I had no idea what the heck I was doing with it.
I still need to learn, but we did get one.
That's a start.
Yes, that's a start. And what's also interesting, I will say, is just that, like, we're living during a pandemic, we're living during COVID, and, we went from being displaced to living in this house with like no furniture, to then I'm like, there's a run on the grocery stores, and like, do we have enough supplies? And like, there was talk at one point about like, let's just drive out of New York and we'll just drive and we'll drive down to Atlanta, or maybe we'll go to Brian's sister in Florida, and it's like, looking at that JUDY kit though, it has so much of what you need in there, like a hand, the radio, I think a hand crank radio and water and bars and flares and the blankets and, you know, all these things that are just like crazy amazing. If you just had it in your car and you just never thought about it again, but like you have it in there, it's like such a smart thing to have. And, you know, we were even thinking like, what if there's a run on the gas stations? What if there's no gas? Like, do we need extra gas at the house? Like,
Right.
you know, now we're starting to think, I think all of us on this call right now are thinking in terms of extremes, because not just my story, we're all living in a state of extreme. Who would have thought that
Right.
my experience would then turn into all of us having the crappiest year, you know? So it's like, we all thought it was just me,
Right.
and now it's all of us.
It's
So,
all of us.
you
And
know,
it's so interesting you say that. One of the things that Soraya, you know, pre-launching of JUDY, taught Josh and I was all about the idea of these kind of high consequence, large scale emergencies and what happens. And there's mass misinformation, there's panic purchasing, there's confusion when it comes to what to do. And I don't think it really sunk in until COVID happened, where I thought, wait a minute, all these things that felt really theoretical suddenly now are happening. And it's why, Chloe, your story is so powerful, because I don't think people really prepare until they hear a story like yours and they think, wait a minute, I'm just like Chloe. Like, I would have done that, or I would have thought that, or I would have told the fire engines to turn their engines off because I don't want to disturb my neighbors. Like, the story is so relatable. And I think it's also why it's so powerful and why we're so grateful that you're sharing it, because it really does wake people up to the importance of being prepared.
well, thank you. And you know what? I think that like my motto is now, it's like, you know what, better safe than sorry. If it wakes up the whole town, oh well, you know, I guess I just never want to be like that person, you know, like who's like a hypochondriac, an overreactor. But you know, better to be an overreactor, I guess, than an underreactor. Like just recently we had like an alert on our phones that there was like a category 2 tornado or some crazy tornado coming our way. And I was like, no way. I was like, just what we expected. 2020 sucks. So I'm like, oh my God, we just moved back into our house. Like, this is insane. I'm like sitting there. I'm like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? I'm like, I'm on like dark sky, like looking, and I like texted my neighbor, Sarah, who I think's on this call. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I don't know. I'm going to like tie down the lawn furniture. I'm like, this is insane. So I'm like, okay, we're waking the kids up. Too bad. Woke them up, took them down in the basement. Like we're sitting down there and I'm like, took the animals down there, you know, and you just start thinking about that. But like better to do that than all of a sudden, like you hear the train sound coming down I grew up in Texas and it sounds like a freight train's coming, you know? My dad moved to Dallas right after an crazy hurricane, tornadoes, right? Ripped through Texas. But yeah, like we all need to be, you know, prepared for the unexpected. And I think that's what 2020 was. 2020 was for everybody. It was the year of the unexpected. So I think like we all need to be a little more vigilant and hyper alert. And you know what? That's not that bad. And like you said, Soraya, there's a way to be educational with your kids, to not like instill fear in them, you know, to make it fun and educational for them. And at some point I'll be having, you know, more conversations with Leo as he gets a little older. As right now, I try to just be like, we're okay, but like, we're okay. Mommy and daddy are here with you. That's all that matters, you know? And really, when we were laying in bed that night, all of us in one bed, I was like, this is home though. Like home is where your kids are, home's where your family is, home's where your mom is, where your best friend is, you know, like all this stuff is great, but like, you really don't need any of it.
It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like a nice blazer and, you know, like earrings, but you know, you really don't need any of it. So
We love a treat. We love a treat moment.
yeah.
Well, guys, I feel like we could do this for hours. I mean, honestly, Chloe, there's so many things. I was furiously taking notes as you were telling your story.
I have to go watch This Is Us, please. Now my kids are sleeping and I missed Tuesday's episode. So that's where I'm going to be.
Okay. So. Well, Chloe, thank you. Soraya, so many tidbits. And for everyone that joined us, we're going to send out a recap of all the tips and tricks that Soraya shared. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Guys.